My name is R. Crosby Lyles, and this is News from the Can. This is expert calls for more public urgency on climate change. Yeah, probably a good idea. So then they go on, they start talking about water in Vegas, that they're pulling up all the grass in the public areas because Lake Mead's drying up. And then there's this cat here that's getting very emotional. These guys are very emotional, and that's cool. I'm not really sure if that's helpful or not. There's a lot of stuff. Let me just say this. There's a lot of stuff, and I think they get into here's Neil deGrasse Tyson. So there's some beefs that I have about people that start talking about climate change. So basically they're saying that the experts are adamant that something needs to be done now. They're showing these effects that may be transient. That's a problem. That's a problem that I have with this whole approach. So they're pulling the grass up in Vegas. And now Vegas is going through, that area of the United States is going through a monsoon season. If you have elevated sea surface temperatures in the Pacific, then they could have a really heavy-duty monsoon. As a matter of fact, there was just flooding in Death Valley. So this is transient. It's bad, but it's transient. And it may happen a lot, but it's transient. So it just makes people who are not necessarily that science-oriented or whatever, big picture type of people, 500-year floods. Okay, so here's they go from the dry Vegas to Kentucky, which just had a flood. Now this is typically more compelling to your average person when they see more than one 500-year flood in a row, in places like Kentucky. This is like a hurricane. This is like hurricane damage, and it wasn't a hurricane. It was just heavy rain. And this is something that we've seen around the world. The heavy rain, that's pretty compelling for most people. Because we're talking about rain that's just absurd. When somebody drowns in their downstairs apartment in New York City, you know what I mean? They have footage of firefighters diving down a flight of stairs into an apartment to try to get these people out, and they can't because they had flash flooding, and people drowned sitting on their couch in New York City. So that kind of shit's pretty compelling. Now you got a guy here, and I don't know what his name is, but the video here will be linked in the description. Yeah, of course, he's a scientist, and he's going to tell you that. That's, we're talking about 2 degrees, and we're not going to be able to keep it below 2 degrees of warming, and that, there might be some runaway global warming that might kick in after that, and people are, emotional, and sometimes emotionalism can be confused with hysterics. And hysterics never really go over very well. In a way, this woman here is an expert. I'm sorry, I don't know what all their names are. I just happened to see this because I'm getting to something else. We're gonna take a little bit of a turn here because there's something else I want to get to. Here's Neil deGrasse Tyson, who brings up Venus, and I'm like, dude, it's apples and oranges. Why do these people want to bring up Venus? Venus has a retrograde rotation, means it rotates in the opposite direction. It's almost tidally locked, but not quite. It's rotating in the opposite direction in such a way that it's almost tidally locked, but rotates a little bit faster than being tidally locked. The orbit is closer to the sun than the Earth. Venus does not have a moon, and so there's all these factors, and then they say, well, it's got a greenhouse. Its atmosphere is because of a greenhouse effect, and I'm like, well, yeah, of course, because it's basically tidally locked, and the surface of the planet is molten, essentially. Or nearly molten. As a matter of fact, I think it glazes over once, periodically. So it's just completely apples and oranges. So not even really germane. And they use that to scare people, thinking that the Earth is going to turn into Venus. And as it is, unless something extremely catastrophic was going to happen, that's just impossible. So it's not a good, really, what it does is when people like think about it, when you think about it for a minute, you know, it's kind of scary for a second, but when you think about it, it can turn some people off. This is a nice little thing. He says that if all the polar ice caps melt, then the Statue of Liberty will be up to her left elbow in water. And that's, you know, that's pretty compelling. But you know, it might do that, and then again, it might not. They got these nice little graphics about how Lake Mead is running out of water. So, Lake Mead is a man-made lake. It hasn't been there that long. How many years has Lake Mead been there? You know? So, in other words, these are things that people need more compelling evidence. So let me get to this. Sea surface temperatures. This is actually sea surface temperature anomaly. So you're looking at this white here. Okay, let's look at we've got a blob going on over here in the Pacific that's been persistent. I started to make this video a couple of weeks ago, and I had some problems with the sound and stuff, and it just didn't happen because I'm kind of busy right now. I've got a bunch of different stuff going on. So this blob in the Pacific is basically where the Kuroshio Current terminates. There's a Kuroshio Current. Basically comes up the eastern coast of Japan and then goes out towards the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Okay, so here's Norilsk. This is the Kuroshio Current. It's a tapestry of interconnecting vortices. Kind of sort of an analog to the Gulf Stream. Very similar. But basically, Kuroshio Current terminates right here in the middle of the Pacific, right where this blob is, right where this blob starts. And you got to look at the actual temperature. The actual temperature is sort of like, you know, it's not a region of a particular temperature. It's a region where the various temperatures are higher than what they should be. According to baseline, I think it's 1971 to 2000 base. So they're saying this is 6 degrees above the 1971 to 2000 base. But it's not an actual patch of a particular temperature because that would produce certain weather conditions, right? So that's pretty scary looking map. And what a lot of people will do if they're on the other team, so to speak, is that they will point out that, okay, 20 degrees here, 20 degrees Celsius is 68 degrees. This is the green. The yellow is, 70 something. So that's warmer, sure. The blue there, 15 degrees is 60 degrees. 60 degrees, 10 degrees is 10 is this blue right here. That's 50 degrees. 5 degrees is about 40 degrees. So the pink is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The deep blue is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But this is where the Kuroshio Current basically terminates. And if we're it's part of the overturning. It is part of the thermal halon overturning current, the Kuroshio Current. So we might imagine that that's where the current actually dives down maybe and give up some of its heat. So and we'd have to drill into that. But what I want to look at is this blob over here before I do that, because this is what I really set up for. So that's there, and that's that's not great. These are elevated temperatures in the Mediterranean, which cause airflow patterns to change and draw more hot, dry air up from the Sahara Desert. And then you have fires in Greece and Italy, you know what I mean, and across some other areas that, this is stuff that people living in Western Europe or, in Europe in general haven't seen. Massive fires, whole villages that are generations old burning down. I mean, that's like, a lot of people dying. I mean, that's like hell on earth. That's an apocalypse. So this should be compelling for a lot of people living in Europe. You can see why there's a lot of people in Europe who are a lot more alarmed about climate change because of stuff like that. But what I really want to get to here, the big thing that I'm trying to get to, is this right here. And this area right here is the Kara Sea. Russia, you see this right here. Right under Russia is Norilsk. And there's a river running by Norilsk, right into the Kara Sea. That's what that blob of temperature is right there. Norilsk is over here. That's the Kara Sea, right? Wish I could rotate that map so you can see it a little better, but that's, trust me, that's the Kara Sea right there. And that's Norilsk. Norilsk is the most polluted city in Russia. Probably in the world. Might be, might not be, but they had the largest nickel mine in the world. Very peculiar to this area, and then supposedly they're cleaning it up. But I just say this to point out a point that I've made many times on my channel here. This is the Megaprojects channel with Simon Whistler, I think the cat's name is. Soviet secret cities, entire cities hidden from the world. It's an awesome video. I enjoyed it greatly. But he talks about Norilsk and how it's the largest, and I've got palladium and everything else. But anyway, the way that they process nickel is they use sulfuric acid, and then they just have these I don't know what they do now. I guess they're doing something now, but they used to just have windows that would open up in the, like vents that they would open up the ceiling and just let the stuff out. Sulfuric acid fumes. So there's an area around the city that is many kilometers wide where there's no life because of the sulfuric acid. Well, sulfuric acid happens to be a primo heat trapper. It's a great greenhouse. I mean, when it be, sulfuric acid droplets, and that's what Venus is composed. That's what the atmosphere of Venus is composed of. Is a great heat trapper. That's your king daddy greenhouse gas. But more importantly, when you acidify seawater, it allows for carbon dioxide and for acid, vapor, to be trapped right above the sea level. It'll release a little bit of carbon dioxide. But anyway, what you have is an amalgam of stuff that will allow the sea surface temperatures to become elevated in temperature. And you can see that right there. So this pocket, and I was looking at this, I saw that, and I'm like, I kept seeing this over a period of time. And I was wondering, I'm like, well, what is causing that sea surface temperature to be basically anomalously high all the time? Every time I look at it, I say, well, that's really anomalously high. What's going on up there? It's from Norilsk. It's acid rain. So something that I've said before repeatedly, and I don't know if I really want to say that CO2 is a red herring necessarily, but it's not as bad as acid rain. What saved our bacon, and the reason that if we had not done something about acid rain in the 80s and 90s, then we would have had deeper climate change shit to deal with sooner rather than later. Acid rain is, so your Permian Triassic meltdown, of the planet was caused basically by two things. You had some carbon release. It's about 4 trillion tons of carbon compounds, CO2 and methane and stuff, but 6 trillion tons of sulfur compounds. The entire ocean had a pH of like lemon juice. And that high concentration of acid in a pitching sea, you know, where you're going to have a misty, it's going to be an acidified, misty surface, ocean surface is going to trap heat. And so you had sea surface temperatures that were basically boiling hot, you know, and so you had small habitable zones in the ocean where fish were able to survive. There's a whole bunch of stuff in that too. One of my theories is about, or hypotheses is that oxygen might be actually created around deep ocean volcanic vents. That's a side issue. But, you know, sea surface temperatures are basically elevated all around the world. This it also has, interestingly enough, will carry like a weather pattern with it as well. So you have elevated temperature right here over the same, this is in the Pacific, the central northeastern Pacific, which is where back in 2013 you had the Pacific blob anomaly was out here. I don't know if we have that going on per se at this particular moment, but we seem to have some weather conditions related to elevated. In other words, because the temperature is elevated there, it might change your weather patterns a bit. So here's your 2-meter temperature anomaly. It's not really that compelling. You know, here we are. It's August 8th. The white is nominal temperature for the 1971, 2000. Oh, that's 1979, 2000. See, why is the atmospheric 2-meter temperature anomaly? Why is that 79 to 2000 and the sea surface temperature is 1971 to 2000? You know, it might be perfectly innocent, but it makes it look like they got something going on. So here again, right over the skies of Norilsk, it's anomalously warm. This is a feature that I've seen a lot, and I would see that without knowing really that much about the history of that particular area, and I would go, wow, that's an interesting blob. It's acid rain. The biggest acid rain producer in the world is Norilsk, right there, right below the Kara Sea in Russia. This big blob of anomalously warm temperature right there. That's Norilsk, pretty much. That's the footprint of acid rain right there. So acid rain is the death blow. And my theory is that, maybe there are players out there that wanted to use fatigue with global warming to deregulate sulfur emissions, and that is like the worst goddamn thing you could ever fucking do in the world. In the 80s, human beings were responsible for half of all sulfur emissions in the world. The smell of the ocean is dimethyl sulfide, so that's even more than that. And volcanoes and everything else. Human beings were generating from burning unregulated fossil fuels. Human beings were producing 50% of all sulfur emissions in the world. And when you look at this, there it is. This anomalous warm temperature right here, that's from Norilsk. That's man-made. And it's from acid rain. Sulfuric acid droplets are way, way, way more heat trapping than carbon dioxide will ever be. And the other thing about carbon dioxide, they say, well, carbon dioxide will stay in the atmosphere for hundreds and hundreds of years. Bullshit. 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 I'm here to tell you that right now. Bullshit. Richard P. Wayne wrote a book, Chemistry of Atmospheres. His first editions were written in the mid-'80s before the piss fight over fucking global warming ever came to be. And he basically said they did an isotopic study of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere after the nuclear test ban treaty, after the atmospheric nuclear test ban treaty had been implemented, and they were basically able to tell from carbon 13, carbon 14. I think it's carbon 14. Might be carbon 13. Produced from nuclear weapons. They were able to track the degradation of that over time, and they were basically able to peg the half-life of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere at 2.7 years. Done. See ya. Bye. Get the fuck out of here with that fuck-ass shit. When people say stuff like dumb shit like that, that's easily debunkable, it makes any kind of sort of movement on climate change impossible. Besides the fact that, it's colorable whether carbon dioxide is really that much, should be considered a pollutant in a sense, because plants consume it. It's consumed by plants. Having said all that, I don't know. So here's this is sulfur dioxide. This is CAMS Copernicus Atmospheric Monitoring Service. And up here you can see the Norilsk area. There's kind of a plume over the Kara Sea, right there in that area, that harborish lagoon type of thing between the island and the mainland there. At 300 hectopascals. So let me look to show you the total column. There's your total column, but it's not that compelling when you look at it. There are other areas that are producing way more sulfur dioxide. Mexico even, but the big offenders are, it's always Beijing, so China, even Japan. Look at that. Looks like you got an area over here. I don't know what the name of this peninsula is over here. I should, but I don't. It is the Petropavlovsk, Kamchatsky. It's the For Fuck's Sake Island. You can read it yourself. Near the Kuril Islands. Yeah, that's a little bit easier. The Sea of Okhotsk. They got something going on over there. I don't know what. Some sulfur, but not so much over Norilsk. Unless they're lying about their emissions or something. I don't know. So a lot of this is from satellite emissions. You got stuff going on. That must be from this area here. That's got to be from oil and gas. Off the coast of Libya and Tunisia here. There's got a spike there. But, look, China and India are the big offenders. Malaysia, they've got a lot of industry going on there too. So, but that's a little surprising. Right off the coast of Libya and Tunisia. I don't know what they got going on there. But this is total column, and here, let me look at the methane for one. And you've also got methane releases. Wow, look at that shit. That's pretty ridiculous. So, surface. Yeah, they've got, so that area of the Kara Sea area, they've also got plenty of methane, carbon dioxide, less carbon dioxide in the northern hemisphere lately. They're constantly changing, they're constantly working on the output of this product. So I assume they want to have the most accurate representation that they can. .500 hectopascals. Carbon dioxide. Yeah, they got a lot of carbon dioxide coming off from that area too. So 300 hectopascals. Yeah, okay. Well, that's interesting. So at 300 hectopascals, which is about 30,000 feet, I think, you got a patch of carbon dioxide right over. I could let it play, but momentarily over the Norilsk area, which would make sense. I mean, if it's they got a lot of mining and stuff going on there, and they've got oil exploration and everything else. Nitrogen dioxide, yeah, they got kind of a persistent, but it's a little further away. But I look for it, so it's because the nitrogen dioxide is photochemically produced. So this blob here tells you that it elevates when the sun rays are hitting it. You get elevated amounts. So if the sun is not out and you have nitrogen dioxide, then you know that it's persistent. It's man-made. It's persistent. Oh, they got a flare right there. Yeah. So, it's a combination of all the above. That's a little flare there up there in the Norilsk area. So, there it is. Links are in the description. I don't want to make it too long of a video, but basically, yeah, it's happening. It is. No shit. But I look at this. I look at the sea surface temperatures. Yeah, that's pretty compelling. But the 2-meter temperature anomaly is a mixed bag. The white is nominal, those nominal temperatures, and it's a mixed bag. So, but that should tell you that you see the extreme temperatures. The extremely hot temperatures and the extremely cold temperatures are mixed together. When you think about, if you look in a pot, when a pot's boiling, if you look at the bottom of the pot and you see how bubbles sort of arise in certain areas and things like that, that's not necessarily a great analogy. I like to use sort of the, you can see a pattern, like if you were to take a thermal camera, look down on top of the roof of a car in the hot sun, and see how the convection is coming off of the top of the car. It's really that it's convection. So you have convection patterns. You have patterns that get established, but necessarily along with that, because of the difference in heat capacity between seawater and the land, and what goes up must come down. Wherever you have an updraft, wherever you have a column of convection, somewhere nearby you're also going to have a downdraft of cooler air from the upper atmosphere. And rain is how the planet is cooled, and it works just like an air conditioner. Evaporation at the surface is endothermic, carries it up to the cloud tops where condensation occurs, which is exothermic, and that heat gets wafted out into space if it's not impeded by other greenhouse gases, which it certainly is. So, and at that point, then the cooler rainwater drops back to the surface and cools the surface of the planet. And it's a natural process. So, water vapor is referred to a lot of times as energy. And the reason it is because the temperature of the Earth is right around the triple point of water, meaning that it's where water exists as a liquid, a gas, and a solid all at the same time. But importantly, you have to think of it as like a piston cylinder device. If you have a piston cylinder with dry air in it and you heat it, then the air will push that cylinder out so much. If it's got any water in it at all, it'll push it out way more, because water as a liquid, so when it goes up to the cloud tops, basically what it does is the water at the surface as a gas expands like a piston cylinder device. It expands and then creates that convection, and when it gets up to the top, then it goes all the way back down to a liquid. So it has this capacity to be able to expand way out and contract all the way down to a liquid. And so that's where they refer to energy. That's where energy comes from. It comes from that expandability, but more importantly, that condensability all the way down to a liquid, just from the change in temperature between the surface and the cloud tops. So that produces energy. It's like an engine. It's literally just like an engine. It just that the moisture in the air expands and expands and expands because of the heat near the surface and from sunlight and everything else, and it expands and you get that convection, that roiling convection, and it gets up to the top, and then it condenses all the way back down again. So it's just like this expanding and contracting piston. So that's where your energy comes from. And when you have cold sea surface temperatures, it has a tendency to draw moisture out of the air. So that's why you have less humidity in Death Valley, which is which is basically California, Nevada, those areas. You have a desert there because any moisture that's coming in terms of fog or whatever gets screened out by the mountains. That's one thing, but cold air has a tendency to pull moisture out of the air. Warm sea surface temperatures, on the other hand, like in the Gulf of Mexico, that stuff just gets carried right up into the lower 48. Contiguous United States, and creates all kinds of havoc. So, Tornado Alley is all about that warm, moist air from the Gulf hitting the cold fronts coming down, and so, yeah. And of course, you've got your hurricanes and stuff too. Oh, it's downgraded. Yeah. So I downgraded. Apparently there's, I always look at Mr. MBB 333, and he's on top of the Saharan dust that tamps down on hurricane development. So, but we could have a wicked September and October. We could have a wicked late August, September, October. You can see these storms wafting off of the west coast of Africa down here. And it's a lot of things in play. But anyway, I just kind of wanted to shoot that out there. You never know. It's hard to say what kind of hurricane season we're going to have. They basically still are. They maintain they meaning the climatological experts still believe that we could have a wicked hurricane season, and we certainly could. The mean season is basically right around September, the end of August through November 1st. That's the mean season. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. And not really much going on right now, according to the National Hurricane Center. So Pacific might be a different deal. Central Pacific, Eastern Pacific. Yeah, they got some stuff. Not a whole lot. Eastern Pacific. Oh, Howard. Okay, sure. Okay. Doesn't look too terrible. It's a hurricane downgrading to a tropical storm, depression by Friday. So, but anyway, we're looking good over here in Florida, and that's all I got. I hope you got something out of it, and we'll just keep on trucking. It doesn't hurt to have. I don't sell any of this crap. It always helps to have extra provisions, extra medication for you and your pets. Communication devices. They sell handheld ham radios, shortwave radios. You can get them off of Amazon or whatever. Good thing to have. You can hear what's going on. You can get news on it. You can communicate if you're really in the shit and your cell tower is out of whack. You know what I mean? You can use a shortwave radio, ham radio, to maybe get a message out that you're in trouble. It's a handy thing to have. It's good to have rope, a cop whistle, that goes around your neck, so that you can, for your kids or whatever, you can keep track of them. And that's if the shit's really hitting the fan. The ability to generate power if you need to and stuff. And I already did extra provisions. Pay attention to the weather. Stuff can happen. I mean, Kentucky, wow. It's like, they got hit by a hurricane, and it was just basically you know, monsoon du jour type of stuff, but they really got shit hammered. It's like a 500-year flood, something like that. So you got to keep your eyes open. That's what's on tap. That's the bottom line. That's what's on tap. Massive amounts of precipitation, and it's not going to be just rain. It's going to be snow in the wintertime. So they talk about rise in temperature, and they used to say, you know, Al Gore was saying for a while, I like Al Gore, I want to beef on Al Gore, I like Al Gore. You know, he's a decent human being. But that whole thing about the snowflake was totally fucking wrong. It just is. You know, the average temperature goes up. You're still going to have volatility. You're still going to have snow. And when you do, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot. So we've already seen feet of rain, perhaps, you know. And when that happens and it's snow, and we've also seen tens of feet of snow fall in one whop. Especially like there's an area in Japan that gets more snow than anybody else in the world. So, you know, you got to just be aware of what's going on. You know, some unfortunate people in New York City drowned in their fucking apartment. I know it's been a while. If you haven't heard about that, then, you know, look it up. Yeah, drowned in their fucking apartment. How about that? You know? So it's a good idea to, you know, I mean, you don't got to be scared. You don't got to run scared. Nobody's got to be scared, but, yeah, keep an eye on what's going on. Basically. And, yeah, we're going to have to do something. And they're basically kickstarting. They're getting the small modular nuclear reactors going. New scale. Apparently got a pretty healthy $1-point-something billion, I want to say grant maybe or something, subsidy, something, to get that going, and that's what we need to do. I mean, you know, solar panels, and I don't like solar panels and wind farms. For one thing, they won't withstand a near and it's for a subject for another video, but they won't withstand a near annihilation event. You know, annihilation, forget about it. You're done dealing no matter what we got. But an event that's nearly annihilation, we could maintain some semblance of a society, you know, a viable or feasible society, if we have the means to produce electric power. So the best way to do that is with, you know, robust nuclear power. Because, you know, depending on what kind of shock it is. I mean, look, every mass extinction event, every near annihilation event that could possibly happen typically entails the sun being blotted out from the sky, you know, or large amounts of volcanic ash for that matter. And that pretty much is going to do a lot of harm to your solar panels. So I think solar panels are great. I think I'm not a big fan of windmills because they kill birds and bats and stuff like that, and they're big hunks of shit that blot the fucking landscape. I don't like them. They're an incredible engineering feat. To get that much, to get a gigawatt at a 12 megawatt, or let's just say 10 to make the math a little easier, to get a gigawatt at a 10 megawatt windmills, which are fucking gigantic, you know, like 1,000 feet tall or some shit like that, you know, as big as the Eiffel Tower. They're gigantous things, okay, ginormous fucking things, you know. Each of them, you got to have like 100 of them. You have to have 100 of them for a gigawatt. 100 of them. And that's a lot of energy to produce the blades, and the blades have to be maintained. You got to hang somebody off of the blade with ropes and a palm sander and shit, and sand them things. And, you know, it's like, it's really silly. It's really kind of silly that we even delve into that. They're the silliest fucking thing we do as human beings, is put up windmills. And the infrastructure, all the cables and shit you got to string along, and the switch gear and all that stuff, and the concrete footings you got to make for them and shit, and they're just an enormous investment in real estate and all that stuff, when you can, a much smaller package, you could have a gigawatt with a whole string of small modular nuclear reactors, and it's a much smaller footprint for a lot less energy. And up front, you can get a lot more power, and to take the next step as human beings, we're going to need a lot of juice, a lot more juice than you can get out of some windmills and solar panels. You know what I mean? And you got to have batteries. Talk about a rape the earth fucking thing. That's a whole rabbit hole, and we'll talk about that later. But y'all just be prepared. And that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Rate, comment, subscribe, and love you guys, man. Take care out there. Could get ugly. We'll see. I mean, I see how much rain is falling out in Death Valley, and I'm thinking, it'd be really funny if it rained so much that it filled Lake Mead back up again. But anyway, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Take care. See you.